everybody, and welcome back to Arcade Tirade, the podcast that's all about video games, all day, all night. I'm Zuve.
I'm Phantom Outlaw.
And let's get started. It's been a long-ass week. Finally get to relax for once. I got my Cayman Jack margarita right here.
Oh, I can't wait to drink after this broadcast.
Oh, yeah. I've already started. I'm professional like that. So what have you been playing lately, Phantom?
Warframe with my daughter. What's the other game I got? Alan Wake. And just got Soul Calibur 6 today, so start that up. Yeah. I was playing that right before 8, before I got talking to you, so.
They have Soul Calibur have more tits than ever?
That's not the game it's Dead or Alive that's known for that more so. They got jiggled physics in this one, but it's not as pronounced as Dead or Alive.
I haven't
pretty much what they're known for.
I haven't heard anybody complain about the jiggles in Soul Calibur. I guess it's not popular.
Polygon tried to do something on it, on the outfit that Ivy wears, which she's had since the Dreamcast version.
Yeah, that's the one I always think of is Ivy. That's her name.
Yeah, so I don't understand the NPC meme that's out now. For the SJW is non-playable character meme. Well, now that's what the SJWs are. They've been renamed NPCs. Basically, you know how NPCs are in games. They pre-programmed words or sentences that they say, phrases, and they just repeat it. That's basically why they're calling SJWs NPCs now.
Pretty soon they're going to be calling them non-progressive characters and chastise them.
That's probably, something like that. But, no, it's weird how we're supposed to be progressive in terms of sexuality and everything, but they're offended by jiggles and stuff in the video game and outfits that female characters wear. It's really odd.
Nice avatar, by the way, speaking of jiggles. I know nobody listening can see it, but his what is it? How would you describe it?
It's a Japanese female with huge breasts.
Huge titties and a little bra or bikini.
Little bra. And what is she holding? A popsicle? I can't. My avatar's a little small, but.
Looks like she's just twirling her hair.
Oh, that's hair? Okay.
She's just pulling her hair.
My thumbnail's small until I haven't looked at it much. I just uploaded it not too long ago. I was trying to get this particular Google Hangout to work. It didn't work last week. For some reason, it's working now. So it's like stuff that wasn't working last week is working now, and stuff that was working last week, it's not working as well. Other than Soul Calibur 6, Alan Wake, and Warframe, I just downloaded. Also got that was on sale. Mega Man X Collection 2.
I was looking at that, man.
$15. I couldn't pass it up. I had the first collection. I was like, I might as well get this other collection too. Yeah,
that looks like a pretty good collection. And then there's the Street Fighter collection, which seems to be a pretty good bundle. And then there's who made Final Fight?
Capcom.
There's the Capcom bundle too.
Yeah, to beat 'em up. I got to get that. I've only played the Final Fight games. I haven't played.
Who hasn't played Final Fight?
What was the other ones they got on there? It was the.
There are a lot of them that I didn't know. They all look very similar, though.
I remember back when Capcom was pretty big with the Street Fighter. Then they did Final Fight, but they were also doing other beat 'em ups. outside of Final Fight. They had one medieval one. I can't think of it.
Yeah. Weren't there a couple of them that kind of reminded me of Golden Axe, of course.
Yeah.
Beat 'em up. Let's see here. It says they have Final Fight, Captain Commando, The King of Dragons,
Captain Commando,
Knights of the Round, Warriors of Fate, and 2 previously unavailable on console games, Armored Warriors and Battle Circuit. So I've only been playing this indie game called The Way. Have you heard of that? It's sort of like it's a pixel art game. It's a stealth game. And you're sneaking into this base and you have to steal a rocket and you have to, turn on and deactivate certain gadgets to get to the next room, and then you have to remember puzzle like elements of the game. And you get a gun eventually, but it's mostly just for like taking out security drones and things like that. It's more focused on like puzzle solving, basically. It has that look like what's that one? There was 1 or 2 on the Super Nintendo that had that look, kind of like Prince of Persia.
Oh shoot!
And you mentioned it. You mentioned this one to me a lot. It's this guy that accidentally gets struck by lightning and goes to another world.
Oh, Out of This World.
Out of This World.
Flashback. Oh, okay. Oh, you got to get Flashback. I think that's on the Switch. It's either coming on Switch or it's available now. I don't know the price of it, though.
What's that?
Oh, Flashback.
Oh, it's on the Switch?
Yeah. I don't know if it's released yet or it's on its way, but I know it's supposed to be available pretty soon, if not now.
Oh, they have a physical copy of it, too. It is looking for a price, it's probably just on the top page. You can get a physical copy for $35 on eBay.
Boy, I still have my Super Nintendo version. I can believe I have a price. I got an 8 out of 10 on Nintendo Life. I never heard of that site. But
well, Amazon usually has the cheapest deal, and it says $29.99.
Oh, okay.
But
wow,
yeah,
really? That's an old game thought it'd be cheaper than that. What game that old? Okay,
the software version might be cheaper.
Oh, okay.
Did you find a price?
June. According to this site, it's 19 US, Canada.
That sounds about right.
Europe, 17. I'm like, yeah. I guess so. If you get the old physical copy.
You know what I've noticed?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, what I've noticed back on the Wii, the NES games were $5 a piece. SNES was $10, and I believe 64 was $15 or $20. But the NES was $5, but now on the Switch it's $7 per game.
Yeah.
Guess they're just trying to recoup that money.
I'm also seeing I got it started with Crash Bandicoot, the remake, or now that console games have user agreements.
Well, what do you mean?
I think PC games, you buy a game and it has the user agreement, and you have to agree to whatever. I've never seen that on a console game until now. They're doing it with the last few games I've bought have had user agreements on it. Like
not to distribute footage or outsource the game.
I don't read them, so I have no idea.
Nobody does.
Weird to me that a console game now, after all these years, would have user agreements.
Well, did you say it was on which platforms are we talking about? Which consoles? I
saw it on the PlayStation 4. I don't think I've noticed it on the. It may have been on the Xbox too. Most of the games I get, if it's exclusive, but Crash is not exclusive anymore. So when I got it on PlayStation 4, that was the first time I saw a user agreement. I remember Trihex was talking about it. He was like, "What am I agreeing to?" And then I got Soul Calibur today, and I'm like, it's odd to me that a console game would have.
We ought to get Trihex on here one of these days. by the way. Yeah, I mean, you've seen the consoles, the three big companies have become more and more stubborn. I mean, it took all of the outrage for Sony to allow cross-platform on online games. Remember, they weren't going to be multiplayer on Minecraft with Nintendo.
Right.
You weren't going to be able to cross-platform online multiplayer. And then they caved into social pressure. That's when I like people caving into social pressure. I mean, they have the right to do what they want, but I do think that it's just better for the company. It's better optics for PlayStation to be compliant with other companies and not, be so up their own asses. But at the same time, I mean, none of them are innocent of that.
Right.
Nintendo had their time back in the 90s when they were in control of everything.
Yeah, that's why a lot of people jump ship. I mean, when they did their business model where they would have a company pay them up front to make games on their platform, regardless if the game sold or not, Nintendo had that money, and the companies had to hope the game sold enough to get in that money back. Or,
And that's what screwed them over in the end.
And, yeah.
And also, they had to buy from a certain manufacturer to make the cartridges, and they had to buy so many.
Right.
Whereas once CD came out with the PlayStation, they were much cheaper to format, among other things.
So I guess good to what your point. I guess it's. I would have to read it. I don't know if it has to do with them not. I don't know if it's a streaming thing where they can't. I haven't had to read that agreement, at least some of it, to see what exactly why they're now putting those in the games. I don't know if it's a streaming thing or the recreating, fans creating the games without selling them or anything. But I'm wondering if that's something like that. Like the team that did Sonic, the latest Sonic, the fans that made this.
I've never heard of Sonic.
The Sonic, God damn it.
I can't think of it either.
We both got the damn game. I can't think of it.
Oh, you're talking about the one where they mashed up all the games.
Yeah.
I can't think of the name either, but yeah. Great fucking game.
Yeah, and there was
Sonic
fans
Mania.
of the Sonic Mania. Jesus. It was the fans of the game that made it, and Sega hired them.
Yeah.
To do that game.
I mean, yeah, that's how a lot of these guys got started. I'm surprised nobody's hired the guy that made Undertale. They might have, actually. The hell's his name? We're bad with names here. Let me see.
Yeah.
Toby Fox, who actually got started by making a hack of Earthbound.
Oh, okay.
And it was one of the creepiest Earthbound hacks I've ever played. And so he took that influence and carried it on to Undertale. Did you ever get a chance to play that anymore?
I have it on 2 platforms. I still haven't played it yet. That's some other games to finish. Or it's like the guy that did Stardew Valley. He, how many years did it take him to make it? He made it by himself, I think.
Yeah. Toby Fox, he did Undertale. He did everything also. It was a one-man machine.
Yeah, Eric Barone. Yep, did the game himself.
So, to jump to news, did you hear... Well, let me just read the headline here. It'll speak for itself. Student makes a playable Wii in an Altoids tin. Have you heard about this?
In a what?
He gutted all the circuits and a motherboard out of a Wii and fit them into an Altoids tin, one of those little, 3 by 1 inch Altoids tin. He put a screen in, he put some buttons in, and it functions as a Wii. And he calls it the Kill Me. MII. It was a college student, and he just did it to prove that he could. The battery only lasts for about 10 minutes, and there are no fans inside, so it overheats really fast.
Oh, okay.
And it's horribly impractical, but he did it just to prove that he could. And you load the games through a little USB drive that he inserted in the bottom.
That's crazy.
He described the project as miserable to complete over the course of a year. He's 23. Aiden Schenk Says, cool, certainly. Practical, absolutely not. And they've got footage of him playing it, actually. I mean, it's ridiculous. This is the worst, as far as controls go, this is the worst thing since the N64 controller.
Which reminds me of the first time I saw, I don't know how he did it. It's back in 99, 98. This guy took a Nintendo 64 controller and somehow put all the games. He had the yellow and white cords you can put into a TV, and you can play all the levels from, I think, Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers 1, and I think he did 3. The first Super Mario Brothers, then I think Super Mario Brothers 3, I'm not sure, but he was able to take that and just had all the games put into the Nintendo 64 controller. And you just plugged it up to the TV. And this was early 90s, late 90s.
Now you can get that at a store for probably...
Stores now.
I mean, you could probably get that at a store. Nintendo would do that. And do you think they're going to do, speaking of which, do you think they're going to do a N64 mini for next Christmas? Christmas 2019?
But only 2 people can get it. Knowing them, who knows? They made Lambo. No, is that Lambo?
Labo.
I won't put anything past Nintendo. If they can make a cardboard, if they can sell cardboard, they may do that. Who knows?
It worked for Google. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And speaking of that, there was... Oh, Nintendo, did you hear Nintendo filed a patent for a Game Boy-like smartphone adapter? You can attach it. I mean, this has been out there before. Other people have made it, but Nintendo filed a patent for it. So some people are speculating that might be their attempt to market their version of like a Game Boy Mini. So you would attach it to your smartphone, and you could be able to play the ROMs. I guess they probably have it preloaded in the add-on. I kind of wonder how that would work, depending on the type of phone you have, because the layouts are different.
Are they just trying to get the technology? Because as far as...
that might just be them not wanting to deal with, like, third-party competition.
Because, a lot of their games now, you can just get on their 3DS or eShop. I don't...
Oh, yeah, you can emulate everything up to, like, a PlayStation on your smartphone.
Oh, yeah. Well, here's a little story. Why is the Switch not getting big games from third parties? There's an article from VG Charts.
Years of distrust. Good old VG Charts.
So I still occasionally check out Nintendo. I never looked at Nintendo. I didn't know they had NintendoLife.com, Nintendo's Reddit page. I don't even read Reddit, so. But anyway, it's not it's only 2 paragraphs.
Well, what do they say?
Let's see. So I still occasionally check out NintendoLife.com, the Nintendo Reddit page, and a few gaming magazines I have sent to my house regularly.
Hey, remember gaming magazines, because we're going to get on that later. I want to get on that later.
Nothing seems to have changed despite how popular the Switch is right now. Big third-party games are still nearly non-existent on the Switch. As far as I can tell, not one of the big holiday blockbusters are coming to the Switch this year. Remind me of the Wii, except when the Wii got some of the big names. Remind me of it. The Switch is not even getting Call of Duty. Even the Wii U got Call of Duty. What is the reasoning for this now?
Wii U got Call of Duty.
Yeah. How has Nintendo explained why this is happening? And I guess the rest of this is just...
because we always make wacky, incompatible consoles.
But they'll say, "Oh, Doom made it," and Skyrim, and
but those aren't really cutting edge, brand new games.
And it was my thing with the I know, but I'm talking about as far as. Well, I mean, that was my concern with the Switches. It feels like it's just other than Nintendo making stuff for it, it's a port over system. But although on the other systems, it's just going to get ported to this. No, I don't think anyone wants to take the chance to make an exclusive Nintendo game from the ground up.
Well, another thing
Other
is
than Nintendo, it seems.
Well, another thing is, why are you going to buy a Nintendo console? It's usually not going to be for third-party games. It's going to be the Nintendo licensed games.
Right.
So you have to, if you're deciding that you're a third party and you want to put that game on Nintendo, you have to look at the demographics. You have to consider the type of people that are buying the consoles. I think that they should, but then again, I'm not in charge of these companies. I get that they don't want to take risks and they don't want to spread themselves out too thin.
I don't know, man. I feel like Nintendo put themselves in this position years ago.
Oh, no, they definitely did. I guess that's just me, since I haven't bought a non-Nintendo console off the actual market in over a decade. I have an Xbox 360, but it's modded, and I got it from a friend. And I mostly just use it for Netflix. So, since we didn't do a show last week, there have been a lot of stories going around. You heard about Telltale Games?
Yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah, they're going under, and there's another company that's going to swoop in and finish up that last installment of The Walking Dead. Another big thing that's been going around, and that was part of Telltale, is the crunch time controversy. How some of these employees, some of these programmers at these game development companies have been complaining that they're working 100-hour weeks or, way over full-time, to that effect. One of them was Rockstar, actually. It says, Dan Houser, the vice president at Rockstar, claimed in a piece in Vulture that some of the members developing Red Dead Redemption 2 had worked 100-hour weeks to make sure that they met deadlines. But then other people have come out and claimed that only some of them do. Those are voluntary. But you're getting different stories from everybody depending on who they are. So I think probably the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Are they saying they're being underpaid or not paid at all or not paid overtime?
It just says that they're being forced to work way too many hours. It says some members, a number of Rockstar employees claim that it's not true.
Oh, Jesus.
However, it's still not a good look for the company. And then, according to Kotaku, Skybound Games is working a deal with Telltale to finish the final season of The Walking Dead. I don't know, did you ever play that?
I played the first, I haven't beat it, but I played the first Walking Dead game from them. I tried out I think they did Borderlands. Not the game, but one of the, I think they did a Borderlands version of, I think Telltale did a Borderlands story game or something. But,
yeah, they were known for story games.
They did. I want to say
adaptations of other franchises.
Yeah, I think they did. Oh God, names are escaping me today. The Galaxy of the Jesus Christ.
The Galaxy of Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Guardians of the Galaxy. Shit. Guardians of the Galaxy. I think they did some werewolf game. I think they did Batman.
They started. Some of the earlier ones were Sam and Max, Wallace and Gromit, and Homestar Runner. Not the actual games, but they used the intellectual property. Then they got Back to the Future and Jurassic Park later on, and then The Walking Dead. So,
The Wolf Among Us. That's the one I was trying to remember. The Wolf Among Us.
The Wolf Among Us. Is that an original?
I think that was their original thing. I think they did. Yeah, they did Game of Thrones. Yeah, Borderlands. Tales from the Borderlands was the ones I was trying to remember too. Batman: Enemy Within, or was it Batman: The Telltale series? But yeah, like I said, Walking Dead. The first one was like 2013. It's the only one I played.
So, didn't you? I think you used to. I don't know if you still do. Do you have a subscription to Loot Crate?
No, I got rid of that.
Okay, well, did you hear that they're now going to be offering another service called Loot Play?
No.
So it's going to be a monthly box of 5 indie games. I wonder what they're going to be. I wonder what it's going to cost.
So they send you code. I don't know how they're going to do that. Is it with
It says every crate will be delivered on the 17th of every month. Oh, here we go. Yeah, in the form of Steam codes.
Oh, okay.
And you can keep the games even if you cancel your subscription.
It's better than what PlayStation does. If you cancel your top tier, if you cancel that, you can't keep the game that's free. You can keep the games that's discounted, but you can't keep the free games. I always think that's weird that they have a business model like that.
So you got anything else as far as news?
No, I haven't kept up with a lot of gaming news in terms of the other thing I heard was, other than releases maybe, and some of the stories you just mentioned, the stuff going on with Telltale Games. And,
yeah, I hear they're down to a skeleton crew just finishing up some last things. I think they have like 10 people left.
I also heard something about them not getting severance pay for the ones that got laid off or fired. I thought I heard something about that too. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. A lot of people have been pretty outraged about this. I haven't followed it too closely just because I never really had anything invested in the company. But, yeah, that's no severance I've heard. And just, generally the idea of a bunch of people suddenly losing their jobs just sucks. So that's no good. It's kind of like a couple of years ago at Konami. People were complaining about the conditions there. They were being heavily monitored. Then there was that one guy that was relocated. They reassigned his job in the company just because he liked something on Facebook that they didn't agree with. One of the other employees quit. But that's old news.
Yeah, I remember THQ, when they closed down, they did some games that they have that's recognizable. They did quite a bit. I think they did like the WWE series.
So, if we're good with news, I'd like to move on to the main topic.
No more news for me.
So, the topic for this week is things that we grew up with in video games, in gaming, that either is completely extinct now or harder to come by. And a lot of younger gamers probably don't even know about some of these things. So I'm talking, we're talking like 80s, 90s, early 2000s, things that just faded away because the technology changed or the culture changed. So why don't you start off something that you have fond memories of from back in the day?
The Atari, the arcades. My parents I never had a home system until I was like 17, but we were at the arcade.
Damn, really?
Yeah, but we were at the arcades almost every weekend or every other weekend, so I didn't miss out on games.
So was the Atari your first console?
No, I played it. My cousins had that in the NES. I got an NES around 17. Asked for one for my birthday. My parents were like, yeah, we'll get you one. I'm like, well, okay. But they just wouldn't buy one. But like I said, when I was always at the arcades, they always took us there. Atari, the time I had a hand-me-down Atari, which only had like Miss Pac-Man and Pac-Man, but then that ended up breaking or something. It didn't last long.
Did you have that god-awful Pac-Man that they claim crashed the industry?
Yeah, I had the like I said, I had a hand-me-down version of it. I mean, I had a hand-me-down Atari, but it played. Miss Pac-Man was better looking, played a little better, but it still didn't look like the actual arcade game because of the technology back then. You couldn't really translate any of that stuff well. But and at that time, man, we didn't care because that's all we had. You can't play. You could always go to the arcade. At least had something to play. So back then, you had Pong and all that. So,
well, that's what was so appealing about the arcades back in the day is that you couldn't do this stuff at home.
Yeah. So, and then if you could, once you got a home console,
unless you were going to shell out $600 for a Neo Geo.
Yeah, but unless you had a home system, we were pretty much okay. We were happy that we had something to play as far as video games is concerned. So we didn't really care how it looked at the time. This is all we had. So we kind of had to like, hey, I'm happy we got a game. system to play it, period. And they had the no pads. It was all stick. I think every game had the little joystick and that one button. If you remember the old Atari and controllers. And I would go to a grocery store or Dairy Queen, always an arcade cabinet in those stores. It was like that common to see games in bars or restaurants.
Now they just have those little video pokers at bars.
Yeah.
You still see, two that you still see in a lot of places are Miss Pac-Man and Galaga.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also seeing more of those like 25 or 50 in one arcade machines. The laundromat down the street from me has a Galaga console or machine.
Oh, okay.
And then every now and then you'll go to a random place. Mostly laundromats and laundromats that tend to still have them. And this was a while ago, but somebody that I used to know told me that there are like one or two companies left that actually make pinball machines now.
That's it.
It's not viable.
Mm.
Now there is a punk rock pinball joint here in town actually called the Silver Ballroom. And that's what I've noticed arcades, they're making a comeback. These millennials, they're old enough now to run their own businesses. They had another one here in town that just closed last month. It was called Arcade, I believe, but they spelled the E with a 3.
Are they still doing that?
Yeah, and there are a couple in Columbia, and it's a combination of bar and arcade. It was pretty cool, but they were playing way too much trap music. At least the one I went to. But yeah, back in the day, man, arcades were the shit. I remember wanting to go up to the mall just to go play at Tilt every weekend.
Hell, I remember you would take, that was before they turned to the tokens. There was a place called Aladdin's Castle where
I remember that.
Yeah, used to be quarters. I do not remember when they turned getting quarters into getting tokens, but I remember that. And I remember the last few times, or like as far as recently, would have been when right before the Dreamcast came out. I remember playing Soul Calibur, and before then was Mortal Kombat 1 and 2, and it was customary that you got a quarter, you put the quarter up on if you're in line to play next, sit up there on the little groove under the screen.
Oh yeah, yeah. And people that were, planning to stay there for a long time, they just had like a row of quarters lined up on the screen. I used to go to, did you ever go to Gunther's Arcade in Columbia, Missouri?
No.
That was the coolest arcade. The place smelled like bleach, and it was like built out of this really old, rundown building, and it was on this hallway. The whole thing was like a giant hallway that went way, way back. It was this narrow building, and there was a big loop. And I would always play Atomic Punk, which was like a rip-off of Bomberman, and Galaga, and then they had the original Tetris with the Kremlin, or not the Kremlin, the Russian castle, whatever it's called, and Stun Runner, which was kind of like Virtual Racer, but a little more advanced and futuristic. Actually, I'd go with my dad because I was a little kid, and he'd play Stun Runner for like 2 hours straight.
That was my mom and dad. They were Centipede and Miss Pac-Man for hours. We'd be up there, and I would jump on Star Wars, Tempest, Popeye, Joust, Burger Time. What else did they have there? I played a little. I played Centipede too, but for some reason I was in love with Burger Time for some reason. I always played Burger Time.
That game's hard as hell.
Yeah, it is.
You only get like 2 pepper shakers.
Yeah.
And then you're pretty much on your own.
Yeah.
I think I made it. The farthest I ever got was like level 4.
Pac-Man Jr. I'm sorry, not Pac-Man Jr. But they had that too, but Donkey Kong. Was it Donkey Kong Jr.? Donkey Kong.
Where you're the only game ever where Mario was the villain?
Yeah. I think it was. What was the one with the guy would spray the bugs? I mean,
that was Donkey Kong 3.
Okay.
That's where you played as Mario's cousin, who was a bug exterminator.
Right. Okay.
They eventually brought him back in Smash Brothers as a trophy.
Yes. But once Street Fighter and all that came out in arcades. Oh, I remember Double Dragon. I played that at the arcade. But this was much early 90s. Arcades were pretty much...
Did you ever stand around and watch somebody that was like intending to beat the whole game? Like there would occasionally be somebody up at like one of the fighting games, especially Street Fighter 2, and they'd have a small crowd around them, and they beat the whole game.
If it was a game I wasn't interested in, I would watch. Like, what's that, Rampage? What was the one with the Primal Rage? I did not give a shit about Primal Rage, but I would watch people play it and see how far they would get on it.
That was like the early primitive version of Twitch.
Yeah.
It was a pre-internet era Twitch. I used to play the ticket games. Did you ever play the ticket games?
No, I was too in. If I did, Showbiz Pizza. Well, it was called Showbiz. It's Chuck E. Cheese now, but at the time...
yeah, I remember that.
Showbiz, I would. And the only arcade game, at least the one that was in my area, had was Spy Hunter. Oh, yeah, man, my cousin used to play the shit out of Spy Hunter.
That's a great game. I had that on the Namco Museum bundle.
Oh, my God, we played
Did you ever play Splat?
I'm sure I have. I'm trying to remember what Splat was.
The food fight game?
Splat.
Be you and one other guy running around like a black background. You know, it was an old game, and you'd get pies and other food items, and your goal was to throw it at the other person. That was it.
No, I don't think I've ever played that.
And you'd have bonus rounds where like random things would fly at you. It wasn't one of the bigger games of the era, but it was still pretty fun.
Pole Position, I used to play that.
Mm-hmm.
Outrun.
Dig Dug.
Dig Dug, Outrun. Space Harrier.
Let me ask you one thing. Speaking of the old arcade games, Galaga, you got to choose one. Galaga or Galaxian?
Galaga.
Hell yeah. Galaxian's, I can't even play that game. It's too slow.
Yeah.
Like Galaga was the perfected version of Galaxian.
Right.
And I'd probably have to say Galaga would be my all-time favorite arcade game.
Do I have an all-time favorite?
It just never gets old.
I don't think I have an all-time favorite arcade game. If I said my favorite, it must have been, I had to say Burger Time was. Because just from the amount of time I would run to that machine and play it. But...
What about Millipede?
I was like, it's Millipede's little son, so I thought it was the same game.
Oh, like Centipede?
Yeah. It's pretty much the same thing.
Centipede and Millipede. I thought it was a fun game, though.
It was still fun, but it wasn't, to me, I guess it wasn't as big as a jump from Pac-Man to Miss Pac-Man. How different those two games are.
No, it was very different. There was another space shooting game from that era. I think it was called Phoenix.
Defender. I used to play Defender. That was one of the side-scrolling shooters. I don't know if you ever played Defender, but it wasn't...
Yeah, I've played Defender. Yeah. That's the one where you're flying back and forth above the planet shooting other ships.
Yeah, it wasn't quite like Life Force or... what's the other game Konami did? That was side-scrolling shooter. Similar to Life Force.
Was it that Salamander game?
No.
It wasn't Gradius, was it?
That's what I'm thinking about. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was a fun one. What was the other one I was just thinking of? There was... Oh, Missile Command.
Yeah, I used to play that.
That game used to scare the shit out of me. Because when you lose, there was this huge explosion that was just deafening. And I didn't know the first time that I played that it was coming. And it almost made me go deaf. It's like that old Atari era, like white noise.
Yeah. Sinistar used to creep me out for some reason. Well, you ever play Sinistar?
Oh, the
They're
talking.
yeah.
Yeah. Beware, I hunger.
Yeah, that thing used to freak me out as a kid. I used to love the game, but it's just like, that's creepy.
Yeah, I've played most. I like to think I played almost all of the like major old arcade games. What was that one where you were driving in that closed circuit and you had to avoid the other cars? It was a Namco game.
At the arcade?
Yeah, I believe it was one of the first games that had background music. Let me see here. So had Galaga, Pac-Man, Dig Dug, Miss Pac, Rally X.
Rally X, yeah.
Yeah, it had that background music.
Now, which one did Rare do that was a top-down racer?
I think I know what you're talking about.
That wasn't...
Death Race?
I thought Rally X was... I guess it's not. So Namco did
No.
Rally X?
Namco did Rally X.
Okay. Then Rare did something that was similar to that then. I think. I could be wrong.
Didn't they do like a... on the Super Nintendo, didn't they have like a rock and roll based top-down racing game? It was isometric. I couldn't tell you the name of it.
Damn it. I don't know. I could swear they had a top-down racing game. I'll find it. But
They did Mickey's Speedway USA. I actually had that for the Game Boy Color. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Then from the arcade, so I'm trying to remember I know the crash of the 80s as far as a gaming crash. But then when Nintendo...
the US 83. Oh, Super Off-Road.
Super
Off-Road?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm thinking about.
1989. Damn.
Yeah. I think that's what I'm thinking about. Oh, that was the Nintendo. Okay, Super Nintendo. I thought they had an arcade. I could be confused. There was a game released on the Midway. They had a collection on GameCube. Midway Games had a game on. They're the ones that ported over Mortal Kombat, Rampage, Spy Hunter, NBA Jam, Cruisin', NFL Blitz. And on the Internet collection, they had that type down racing game. It was called Rush. Remember a game called Rush?
Yeah, I mentioned that last time I had a San Francisco Rush.
Oh, okay.
On the Super or the N64. And Cruisin', yeah, I had Cruisin' USA too. That's right. That was a great game.
Yeah.
Damn, dude, that's been
I know
forever since I played that game. Those were the two games I had when I first got my 64. I had Super Mario 64 and Cruisin' USA. I remember that because you'd have like this girl that's supposed to be riding with you, and she'd like comment on things every now and then.
Right. Yeah.
I remember that because in the Grand Canyon, and the girl's like, "Wow, so this is the Grand Canyon." Like that was the coolest thing back then.
Oh yeah, when games had, I remember Star Fox had the speech. Oh, when in the game it was like, oh, I thought that was the peak of technology. I thought that was it. There would be nothing more, nothing better than this.
Well, that's how the consoles sell. At the time, there's nothing better.
Yeah.
But then you look back and you're like, I paid $60 for this?
I remember, oh my God, I remember I would get a Super Nintendo game full price, and the following week, no matter how long I waited, the price would drop right after I bought the fucking game. It's like the universe it was, I remember getting Demon's Crest. The week after that, the game.
The Ghosts and Goblins game?
Yeah.
I never did play that one. I heard it was pretty good, though.
That's great. That's one of my favorite NES games. Super Nintendo games. Demon's Crest.
Demon's Crest, brought to you by Crest Toothpaste. No, I suppose that would be what it was. It would have been like that if EA had made it.
Fuck EA.
To unlock the final level, please pay $5.
God, that was 94. Yep. Demon's Crest. It's a great game. They ended up releasing that on the Wii U. too. That the old game they in the eShop.
Now, was that as hard as the other Ghosts and Goblins games?
No.
Makes sense because you're actually playing as one of the demons. Meanwhile, Arthur's just getting screwed over left and right all the time.
And you could change depending on what you had to do in the game or what area you could change your demon form depending on what the situation was. It was a cool. God, I love that game. I'm gonna end up playing that again sometime soon.
Did you ever play The Magical Adventure with Mickey Mouse?
Fuck, dude. I played the holy hell out of that.
Yeah, same here. I love that game.
That is one of my favorite games, too. I didn't think I would like it because it was a Disney game, but I had heard so much about it. I took a chance and bought it, and I loved it ever since.
Well, around that era, Disney was they were licensing at least some pretty good games.
Yeah.
They had the Duck Dodgers game. Did you ever play that?
No.
That was a pretty good. It had an inventory system. You go from planet to planet, and you had a huge range of weapons that you could buy between levels, and like recovery items and power ups and things like that. The Marvin missions because you were fighting Marvin the Martian, and then there was a Bugs Bunny one. I can't remember the name of it right now, but that one was pretty cool too. You go from episode to episode fighting against your typical Warner Brothers villains, your Looney Tunes bad guys.
I think the only
and the Taz game for Genesis wasn't bad.
The only game I had that was a Looney Tunes game was Roadrunner because I'm a huge Roadrunner fan. But
that was a good one too.
But the controlling him, his jumps was ass.
Yeah,
but I still like the game though.
It had its issues definitely.
But yeah, I was like, I didn't give a shit. It was Roadrunner, so I dealt with it. So around,
and that's another
80,
thing.
Yeah,
I was just gonna say games were a lot harder back then. I mean, for the most part. I mean, you have like your Cuphead, your Dark Souls these days, but in general, games were a lot more difficult.
Yeah, them games did not hold your hand. And I forgot too. We look at the price, and I hear people complaining about a game being 6 hours or something like that.
Oh, fuck you! I've played 120-hour games.
Dude, if you get those games back in the day, if you played through them, they're probably 45 minutes max. If you like Contra,
if you know what you're doing, yeah.
If you know what you're doing, you pay full price for a game that probably lasts 45. I mean, it's replayable and everything.
Yeah,
but
that's another thing. It was a lot of those games were replayable. I mean, when you're making a platformer that can be beaten in under an hour, you've got to have replay value.
So when I hear people complain about the game, it's only 12 hours. Like, all right.
Here's Contra. Play this, then get back at me. No, they wouldn't even. They would be like, "Oh, that's too simplistic looking. It's too hard." I think it was one of the newer Marios. If you die a certain number of times, they just give you a power up.
Power up, yeah. Ninja Gaiden or Gaiden will probably make people commit suicide.
Like a true ninja.
In today's generation, they couldn't handle Ninja Gaiden.
Well,
Gaiden.
They'd first probably complain, some of them, about cultural appropriation.
Yeah, that too.
Which I don't even know if that's true. Was the ninja was Japanese, wasn't he? Or I don't even know.
Yeah, I think, he was Japanese. They find something to complain about still.
I mean, I guarantee you some of these people have never seen, like, the old under-the-counter, behind-the-counter adult games that they had back on the Atari.
Oh, yeah.
Like Custer's Revenge.
Yeah.
Remember that? Yeah?
Yeah.
I remember back in the late 90s, there were rumors going around that they were going to do a remake of Custer's Revenge for the 64.
It was crazy about Nintendo's when they did that. We're family friendly.
Yeah, that's something that would never happen on the 64 or a Nintendo console.
When they did that, and then when they got their ass kicked by Sega with the Mortal Kombat, the first Mortal Kombat game is when they changed their tune with MK2, and then Conker's,
Conker's Bad Fur Day.
Yeah, they went like it seemed like they were trying too hard to be non-kid friendly. Like, yeah, we're not as kid friendly as you think we are.
Well, somebody had to do it.
It's just weird how they just money talks, man. That they had a hard stance on we're family friendly. We're not going to do it. And then when and it was the worst version of MK, but because it kept the blood in it though, as far as Sega's concerned. Because I rented that to see. I had the Super Nintendo version just because I had Super Nintendo. And I think I had a Genesis at the time, but the superior version, even though it didn't have the fatalities and the blood in it, was the Super Nintendo version. But the sound and it was so horrible on Genesis, but because it kept the user code to get the blood and fatalities, that's what people wanted. And so once MK2 came around, Nintendo was totally different.
That got the government all riled up.
But so after, I guess, the crash in the 80s, 85 comes Super Nintendo. I'm sorry, the Nintendo and NES. And I remember seeing, I remember they advertised the hell out of that. Was it Rob? I never got one of those.
Rob the Robot and the game Gyromite.
My cousins had the, now when I go to Chicago, they would, again, I never really missed out on on home consoles. I just didn't own one, but whoever, a relative of mine or a friend of mine always had one. So I never missed out on Zelda or Karate Champ or anything like that. Some of the Kung Fu, all those games, a lot of them
Kung
had
Fu,
it.
Man.
I would play those over their house and everything. So I remember the track and field game was the big pad. At least my grandmother and my aunt, they had it at their house when we go to Chicago. Lay out that big pad, and it was the red and blue button. You played track and field, and you actually ran on it to run fast.
Yeah, I remember that.
You made all the damn noise.
By the way, speaking of foot pads, peripherals, shout out to DDR, as much as I'm probably going to get hate for saying this. DDR and I believe it was Pump It Up. Now, of course, you know, I'm in a different generation than you, but that was my shit back in, like, middle school. I'd go up there and play the hell out of those games. Introduced me to J-pop.
Oh, okay.
Talking about, like, going over to other, you know, family houses. My cousins in Florissant, they had an NES, and they had a game I didn't have, Mickey Mousecapades. Or Mickey Mousecapade. Do you remember that?
I remember that name. I don't think I played it.
It was not a very good platformer. It was hard as hell, and you were Mickey and Minnie at the same time, but if one of you got hurt, then you both died.
Who made that?
Let's see. Hudson Soft.
It's like if Capcom at the time didn't make those Disney games, I didn't touch it.
Wait a minute. It says it was developed by Hudson Soft, and in America it was published under Capcom.
Oh, okay. Well, still. I think after Magical Quest, I would compare other games to that one, and I just didn't think it was anything better than that game, so I didn't.
All right, well, this was years before the Magic Quest.
Oh, years before.
Yeah, this was NES. This was
NES. Oh, okay.
1988.
Well, like I said, like we just said, games back then, it's hard as shit.
Yeah, but I feel like it wasn't fair. Like there's difficult, and then there's just not fair, like just flawed game design.
Yeah, that's why I like Cuphead. Oh, Mega Man 11. I mean, it's not Cuphead difficulty, but it's like it's not a walkthrough. This new Mega Man 11. So I like games if it's going to be difficult and challenging. At least I feel like the game. It's my fault that I died. I don't like a game that's cheap hits.
That's what I liked about the Ghosts and Goblins games. I've noticed that people now call it a puzzle platformer because you can beat it, you just have to memorize the patterns.
Yeah. Oh, that was the thing too back playing games back then is if you can remember the pattern, this will be based on how to beat a game a lot of times is not on RNG. I'm just going to guess every game I've always had RNG, but if you knew the patterns, you could easily figure the game out and beat it. That's how I beat Ninja Gaiden on the Xbox, the newer version of it. That game is hard as fuck, even on normal. I remember a coworker of ours, he had the game too, he quit. He's like, I'm not fucking with that game anymore. Like, I just learned the pattern. It had that old school difficulty, but if you knew the pattern of the enemies, you could beat it. And after I beat that game, I said, if I can beat this, I can beat anything, because that shit was ridiculously hard.
Even the original Super Mario Brothers got pretty tough near the end. And I consider that a relatively more fair game for the time being, as far as difficulty goes. I mean, Mario 2 was pretty much easy. All the early Mario games, except for Super Mario World, I feel like that one was pretty easy all the way up to the end. But all the old Nintendo Mario games, they progressively got more difficult as you went on. The worst, to me, the most annoying is World 7 in Mario 3, the one with all the pipes and the piranha plants.
Oh, yeah.
Well, World 8 wasn't easy either. That was, you remember that part where you're just in complete darkness and you go over those platforms and you hope that you don't get sucked down?
Yeah.
So, what about Blockbuster? What about all the old rental stores that they used to have in every grocery store?
Well, I was going to say even before that, I guess during that time too, you had Babbage's Electronics Boutique.
What was the company that was bought out by Game? What's the one that's big now? The only one
outside of Slackers and GameStop.
GameStop. What was the company that was bought out by GameStop? They were very similar. Was it EB Games?
Yeah, that Electronics Boutique.
Oh, yeah, you said
I think that was
right.
it. Yeah.
Babbage's was my shit, though.
Mine, too.
Funkoland, dude.
Funkoland, yeah.
And I'm glad Slackers is still around. Have you ever been to the original Slackers? Well, nobody can go there anymore, but did you?
I don't know. The one in my area was the only one we had, so I don't think I've ever been to the Missouri one.
The original Slackers was in Columbia, and it was they went into like an old 2-story apartment, and they just converted it into this really cool store. They used to have a bunch of couches by the front, and they had every console up until that point. I think the first time I went there, the 64 was the new hot thing on the block. And they just had shelves and shelves and shelves of games and comic books. It was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And they still have a Columbia location, but they've stripped it down quite a bit.
Oh, so they were out before. See, I heard of Slackers back when the Dreamcast came out. Because a friend of mine, we would go. I don't know how he would find these places. That's how we found the Game Trader.
Yes, my old friend, the Game Trader.
He would go and find these obscure stores I had never seen before, like Game Exchange. Well, I don't know how many were out in St. Louis, but there was one over in Crestwood I used to go to all the time with him. We go to that one, and it was Game Exchange. They were like a mom and pop.
This segment will only be relevant to local listeners, by the way.
Yeah.
Some of these places.
So I don't know if Game Exchange.
I remember Game Exchange. I don't know if they're still around, though.
No, they used to be across the street from where that old Crestwood Mall used to be. There used to be a cross street from there.
Yeah,
they had another location.
They had a few of them. There were 2 of them out by me in St. Charles County. When
okay. So it was more than okay. I used to only go to that one. Then I had found another one that was out south. I can't think of the name of that city. Off 55. If you keep going straight, there was one there. Across from
Festus?
Best Buy. It might have
Arnold?
been Festus. Maybe. But I think it was Arnold. Maybe Arnold. Go down 55, keep straight all the way down. There was Toys R Us was going out, but it was across the street from a Best Buy. And I think it was like a gas station or a car wash somewhere in that area too. I should go to that one. Then they're going too, but I think the last time I set foot in one of the stores like that was on Babbage's and Crestwood Mall, and then the Crestwood Mall is gone. So I think Veronica was the last game I bought out of there.
I think my last one was Silent Hill, the last game I bought from a game exchange.
But like you said, rentals, Family Dollar is the only other place I know now that lets you still rent video games. But man, Blockbuster,
Family Video?
Family Video, yeah. Is the only other place, video rental place that still you can rent games at.
Did you know they still use last time I was there, they still use DOS on their computer systems?
Oh, no.
Yeah, like they're through and through old school.
I had a horror story as far as game systems concerned. They didn't clean out the cartridges, the Super Nintendo cartridges, so I would not pay attention to that. I would rent a bunch of these games, and my first Super Nintendo the connectors got so dirty that it wouldn't play games anymore because I was renting them and they weren't being cleaned out. That's when I ended up getting a Super Nintendo cleaner.
Oh, yeah, I remember those.
At the store called Venture.
Yep.
And Grandpa's.
Yep, I remember Grandpa's.
And so I ended up, that thing got so messed up, I ended up having to buy another Super Nintendo. But I learned my lesson. I would clean out, if I rented a game, I would clean it before I put it in there. And
be kind. Please rewind.
They would not clean those damn things for nothing. I mean, I would have somewhere it looked like they took the cartridge, stuck it in dirt as if it was the top of the Super Nintendo, and then pull it back out. Like who? It's weird.
Right? Who are you people? But yeah, man, all the grocery stores, they used to have the video rental sections, and the general stores. Shop and Save, rest in peace. Schnucks, Deerbergs.
Oh, that's what I'm going to ask. This Shop and Save's over your place. Are they totally gone? Because we had 2 in my area. Oh, wow.
Yeah, they all shut down, man. No, the parent company shut down all of the St. Louis. There are still Shop and Saves in other states, but they shut down all of the St. Louis Shop and Saves, and most of them were bought out by Schnucks.
I did not know that. That's why they're called. Okay.
Yeah, have you been since the transition?
No, I mean, we had 2 in my area. One closed down because there was a store called Rural King.
Yep, I remember them.
I guess they rent. I don't know how they end up taking over that. They end up shutting that particular Shop and Save down. Now they own that space, and that place had been there since I was a kid, going there shopping.
And by the way, have you been into a Rural King lately?
No.
It's like going back in time. It's like Walmart in the early 90s. They still have free popcorn at the front desk.
And then the second Shop and Save we had, I remember those workers were told to go to that one to work there, and they end up getting shut down.
Mm-hmm.
But we used to have a Kroger is where one of the arcade cat Miss Pac-Man used to be. Now that Kroger is in other states, it's not in this area.
Yeah, Kroger's the biggest grocery chain in the United States. It's just they don't have a presence here in the St. Louis.
St. Louis.
They have one in Troy. That's the last in the area. And that's not even, that's Lincoln County. That's not even St. Louis. But they got great deals there. I go there all the time when I go see my folks. They're talking about actually re-entering the St. Louis market in the coming years. I hope so, especially because, now that Shop and Save is going to leave a void.
We used to have a Nationals. Is Nationals still around?
No.
Anywhere?
No, their Nationals gone. Price Chopper's gone. IGA, that's another big one, but we don't have them either. Well, no, I take that back. Okay. We have one in St. Charles if you go up Highway 5 by 370.
Oh, okay. Aldi is, Schnucks is what we got left.
Aldi, they've tried to rebrand themselves. They're trying to be more prominent. They pretty much re-image their company. They're competing now with Save-A-Lot, which they haven't really done much to change their image. And then Walmart, of course, they're really trying to compete against Walmart because they underprice everybody.
Right.
And I hate Walmart, but that's a totally different conversation. For economic reasons, but yeah.
But
video games. But let's get back to video games. I rented more games than I ever bought at those old rental places. I remember Deerberg's had the most impressive rental selection. They had an entire wall of video games, probably 200 feet long. I'm probably exaggerating from memory, but I'd go in there. That's where I first got Super Metroid. Where I first ever played Super Metroid was I rented that from a Deerberg's.
Okay. No, I bought that straight up. I used to go to a Venture. Oh, Walmart. Well, yeah. When Venture got rid of Venture. I started putting games in layaway at Walmart. Walmart. And,
my God. Service is needed in layaway. Attention shoppers, we have a new blue light special in aisle 7.
So many games is because of the layaway at Walmart. And,
I know I'm a hypocrite because I just said let's get back to games, but Kmart, did you know there are only 2 stores left in St. Louis?
That's more than what we got. We have none.
There's one in Florissant and there's one in Festus. And I'm sure they're going to be gone soon too.
Let's see, what else do I remember? I remember outside of renting, the first time I touched a EGM magazine was any magazine period was, and even before Nintendo Power was, because I didn't even know they had.
You mean Nintendo propaganda?
I didn't even know they had video game articles. It's who would have a whole magazine based on video games? IGN did.
IGN, Game Informer.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Game Informer is one of the last ones that's still around.
I used to have EGM, Game Players, the official magazines. I never cared for their reviews because I knew it's going to be probably got paid for them. But Next Generation had Nintendo Power. But EGM was probably my favorite one out of all of them. Though.
Oh, absolutely, because they didn't have allegiance to anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I preferred the outside gamer magazines, and plus EGM had Shu and Chan.
Who was Sushi? Sushi X was in there too, I think.
What's Sushi X? Is that another comic?
No, he was one of the writers and or critics. One of them in EGM. I think it was EGM.
Oh yeah, they had Sean Baby too.
Yeah. It was another gaming magazine. They had the faces. You talked about it not too long ago. I never can fucking remember their names. But they had the faces to rate the games. It was a sad face. The game was bad. They had excited faces, 8 to 9 out of 10, as far as how good the game was. I'll think of it.
Oh, like the face was based, the emotion was like based on the rating?
How good the game was
Yeah.
based on, the face is based on how good or bad the game was.
Yeah, I remember that.
I used to like them too. They had no allegiance to anyone either.
Yeah, but Nintendo Power, even though I knew that they were biased, I had a subscription. I used to love that magazine.
I did too.
They had a lot of interesting. You remember they had those periodical comics. They had one for Legend of Zelda. They had one for
Metroid.
Super Metroid. Yep.
Yeah.
Those were a lot of fun, and they basically like
Star
gave
Fox even had it.
walkthroughs for the first half of an entire game.
Yeah, I think Star Fox even had it.
Yeah, they had a lot of them in there, and then I have some really old. I know you've got a lot more than I do, but some really old Nintendo Powers back when they would actually like review new TV shows. They would go beyond video games.
I have some of the earliest. I know I got one with when Mega Man X first came out on Super Nintendo. They had the whole map of each stage and where you can start. Well, I think a lot of Nintendo Power games had strategies. It's mostly why I got those magazines.
Then they used to have the rumor section. They used to have Pack Watch, which became Game Watch once cartridges fell out of style. And then they discontinued the magazine. It's been a while ago now. What year was that?
Man, I remember the last issue I saw was in Toys R Us, and that was...
Oh, there's another rest in peace right there.
Jeez.
I mean, now they've got a podcast, which, that's cool. At least they're back in one form.
I used to have Game Fan. Well, EGM had EGM 2 as well, because they were doing a bi-monthly thing. At first, they started off as a... it was same as the other magazine you would get the earlier that month. Then they switched it to being a straight-up strategy guide for games. I think after like first or second issue, it was like, this is pretty much repeating ourselves.
What I like,
made one informative, and the other one was a straight-up strategy guide for games.
What I liked about EGM is that they actually did some really good journalism.
My favorite stuff was the April Fool's stuff.
Remember when they were going to do an HD remake way before they actually did? Wind Waker, yeah.
No, when they did the freaking... they had a picture of Sonic and Mario fight. I think it was Sonic. Yeah, Sonic or Zelda. Link, fighting. This would have been the upcoming Smash, and it actually happened.
Right, well, some of these things, it's only a matter of time because they know that these are things that people actually want to see. That's why they buy into it.
But they did it at a time where Nintendo and Sega did not like each other.
Right.
Like, they were not, so it was, when they did that, it was like,
I remember.
Was a real good April Fool's joke.
I remember they had an
article.
article.
It ended up coming true.
They had an article with Nintendo, they had Mario and Sonic on a wedding cake, and it says, what if they married?
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah.
So, you remember the old... the fold-out posters that would come in Nintendo Power?
Yeah.
And then you tried to tear them out, and they'd always tear, or the staples would get caught in the way.
Yeah, I could never. I think I would take a ruler, cut a jawline, and then cut it with scissors so I don't tear up the freaking poster. Game Pro was the name of the other magazine that I used to like. I can never remember the name of that. Game Pro. It's the one with the faces. With the rating system was the faces. What else? Game Gear.
Game Gear and its 4-hour battery life, 6 AA battery.
I don't know. Me and my friend, probably only other people I would know that had a Neo Geo Pocket.
I don't think I knew. I didn't know anybody with one of those.
Yeah, I still have mine actually.
I had a Gamecom.
Now you're the only person I know that had that.
Yeah, I'm the only person I know too. I had a Midway Arcade collection, which, by the way, was the first time I ever played Sinistar, going back.
Oh, okay.
And then it was supposed to be internet compatible. This was like, early internet. It was one of those multi-function consoles which was before its time and ended up being a big flop. Such a waste of money. I begged my parents. I don't even know why my parents got that for me. I don't know what I was thinking, or if they just bought it on a whim. I don't know. But yeah. Well, one thing I will say about the Game Gear is that it had a backlit screen, unlike the Game Boy.
With all that, you would think with all that, it was color, the backlight, it would have, I guess the battery life was, I don't know if that what was the big issue, but it just, nothing could overpower the Game Boy.
Well, I mean,
no matter what they did.
Yeah, the Game Gear was basically a handheld Master System. Sega's first console.
Right. It's just weird that it didn't matter. Nintendo just always beat it in the handheld. Anybody, even when the PSP, I think they were the only one that actually kind of competed with it with Nintendo handhelds. Mm-hmm. But
well, the Vita's still around.
Yeah, I know. It has the use for other functions now. Still play games, but it has other functions. It's a great system, I think. It's just Sony screwed themselves with the price, and then I think at the time, I don't know if they've changed that firmware. They could have. You had to use their particular memory cards, if I remember correctly. It was, and everything was pricey, and nobody didn't wanted that shit. It's like I can't afford all this stuff. You can't use a third party, SD card or anything like that. They probably can now, but I don't know. I remember when it came out though.
So I pulled a couple.
It had to be Sony stuff.
I pulled a couple of listicles, as they call them these days. This one's from BrainJet. 19 things that will hit 90s gamers with a serious dose of nostalgia. Mario Party blisters. From back when we had the old Mario Party, a lot of the games you had to rotate the joystick a trillion times.
Mm-hmm.
And most of us would use like the palm of our hands. And I remember getting these horrible blisters. I'll just cover some of the bigger ones. This seems like a mid to later 90s nostalgia, not as far back. One word, Navi. Blowing your cartridges, which actually does more damage than help or than good.
Now, I never heard that does more damage. What damage does it do?
Well, because a lot of times the better way to clean it, to get the dust particles out, is actually to use a Q-tip.
Q-tip, right?
In alcohol. But a lot of people, when you blow on it, your saliva gets into the cartridge, which actually makes it worse for the game to function because that moisture gets in and it fucks with the board and all the hardware inside of the cartridge.
I would think alcohol would be worse for it.
Well, alcohol actually, it sterilizes.
Oh, okay.
Some rubbing alcohol. Wanting to shoot the Duck Hunt dog. Because that little snarky bastard would come up every time you missed.
I always felt bad for shooting the ducks.
Oh, you're taking the PETA approach.
Yeah. I was, it's not even the PETA approach. It was more like, if they were just flying away. It wasn't really bothering anybody.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't feel bad about running over hookers in Grand Theft Auto, do you?
I never had to. I don't play Grand Theft Auto.
Oh.
But in Saints Row, I would DDT, like, there's certain moves you can do in Saints Row where you can attack the NPC characters with, like, wrestling moves, or you can smash your head against the floor and stuff like that. I would do that.
I'm a violent motherfucker in games.
I am too. I just felt bad about the ducks.
Shout out to all the 8-bit ducks that
died for
did a service for our entertainment.
Yeah,
you will not be forgotten.
I don't feel too bad about most things. I guess one day we do a segment on games that made us cry.
Oh yeah, you should have just used the Phoenix Down, dude. It worked every other time.
Should just Phoenix Down on those ducks and Duck Hunt.
Having a gold Legend of Zelda cartridge, which I never had.
I ended up getting one when was it Funko Land? This guy we knew, my friend, he knew this guy who worked at a Funko Land, and he was still selling the 8-bit cartridges, Nintendo cartridges, and they were all like dirt cheap. Ended up getting a gold Zelda with a book with a instruction manual. Oh, that's another one. Instruction manuals, and came packed in.
Having a game described on the back of the box, they don't even do that anymore.
No.
And some of these games, actually, you needed the instruction manual, like Star Tropics. Remember that?
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't the manual, but it was a piece of paper you had to dip in water. But yeah. But you couldn't figure out this puzzle unless you actually had the secret message. Echo the Dolphin. Did you ever play that?
I think I have that.
Yeah, I used to.
I have the Dreamcast, the updated Dreamcast one. I played the old one. I think I rented that years ago when you could rent it. I think I did end up renting that. It's a weird game. Good one, but it
was an
crazy
interesting
what you
game.
do with that.
Yeah, it was graphically very impressive for its time.
Yeah.
But I had no idea when I was a kid what to do. The introduction of the Rumble Pack on the N64.
Star Fox kicked all that stuff off. I remember going to pick that up. I think I had that pre-ordered. And I remember the doors open, just like when the Dreamcast. I remember launch days. All the launch days I've been to was Dreamcast, PlayStation 2, and Star Fox. And my goodness, people ran like crazy to get a Star Fox.
Oh, it was madness, man. Banjo-Kazooie was similar when that came out.
I think Ocarina of Time was worse because I couldn't find one anywhere. And I had just happened to find one as a guy was just stocking them after getting a new shipment in.
I remember
that same day.
I remember it distinctly. It was on my 8th birthday. I was in my grandparents' kitchen. I got Ocarina of Time.
I was in college at the time, and me and a co-student, what do you call him? Another guy in my class.
Oh,
no.
Yeah, one of your classmates. Yeah.
He and I, because he was a huge Zelda fan too. We were the whole class like, "You ready? Yeah, you ready?" That's all we said through the whole class because we knew what we were talking about, getting our Ocarina of Time, and we luckily ended up getting it both that same day. Even though everywhere I went, it was sold out. I'm talking everywhere I went was sold out, except for I went home. But coming home, I'm like, shit, I'm not going to get this game today. So I went to Best Buy. I was like, got there just as the guy was reshelving or restocking that game. It's like, we just got these in.
Let me ask you this. Did you know what an ocarina was before that game?
No.
Neither did I. I think most people didn't either.
Games have taught me a lot of stuff that I didn't know about. Especially Japanese games. Tend to I didn't know this stuff existed.
See, games can be educational without being boring.
Boring, yeah. I remember Game Genies, the Game Genie and the Game Shark.
Oh yeah, I used to use the hell out of that. I used to use Game Shark on. I know, again, you're the only person in the world that hasn't played this, but GoldenEye. There were a lot of fun cheats that you could put into that game. And that was the age of rumors, like crazy rumors before people could disprove them easily. There was a secret island that they left in the first level of GoldenEye that you could see, but you could never get to. And they said, oh, if you use this combination of Game Shark codes, you can actually activate this little boat that you can ride over to the island. And it didn't work.
I remember cheat codes, not just Game Gear, Game G, but, button combinations. Mm-hmm. For cheats in games.
Konami code.
Not just Konami, but other games.
Right, but that's the most famous one. I'm just
famous one, yeah. There's a game called Loaded on PlayStation. One of the first PlayStation games to come out. And Loaded was a top-down shooter.
Speaking of Loaded, shout out to Cayman Jack. They're not paying us, but anyway.
It was a top-down shooter. You played as prisoners trying to break out of jail or prison, shooting guards and enemies and stuff. It's a wild game.
There's a game like that now. What's that indie game that's got that 8-bit where you're trying to break out of the prison?
Was it Escapist? The Escapist?
Yeah, Escapist. I imagine they're not the same, but
no, Loaded
that's what I
was
thought of.
Loaded was crazy. You played as, the guy with two guns. I think it was 4 or 5 characters. Loaded. If you look up Loaded on PlayStation 1.
I'm not really a gun person, but I'm not anti-gun, but how practical is it to wield 2 pistols?
And I don't know, video game logic.
Right, I know. I'm going out on a long stretch there, but if you think of like all the firearm wielding badasses in video games, a lot of them always had 2 guns, 2 pistols.
I know John Woo movies always have the gun guys with 2 guns.
2 guns and doves.
But Loaded had a character that did that. Captain Hands was his name. He was my favorite. He was like, he had ribs. He had no torso, so he just had a skeleton of his torso. I think a pirate hat, some kind of hat on, and 2 guns. Anyway, he was my favorite. This one guy had a missile launcher that had 2 tits on the front of it. Or the missiles are shaped like tits.
Of course.
Him. He had a teddy bear as like his best friend or some shit. Like the big guy was a baby, like a big baby.
Mm-hmm.
He had a weird gun. I think he had a female. She uses electricity or something. I forgot what her weapon was. She was cool too. All of them were pretty cool characters.
Missing Number. Remember that? Missing No. Missing Number was the glitch Pokemon that you could get on Pokemon Red and Blue.
Oh, see, I didn't get to Pokemon until, honestly, 2012. Because of the 3DS games. I actually even got into Pokemon. My little sister was into it, and I liked Pokemon Stadium. But as far as I went with Pokemon, I watched the cartoon, I think like the first season, but I did not care about Pokemon at all.
The funny thing about Pokemon Stadium, I was an early adopter of Pokemon, of course. I started in 95. I got a red version. I played through Gold and Silver. Then I dropped out. But I had Pokemon Stadium, and the stuff that they're doing now in Pokken Tournament, I wish they were doing that in Stadium. Because Stadium was just basically like a 64 avatar version of the typical fights you had in the Game Boy. Like they have like these, it was still cool for the time, but now they had these very basic animations for the attacks, and the Pokemon just stood still. And they'd have some animations, but it was more of a visual project. It looked cool. They wanted, everybody wanted a full 3D Pokemon, and now of course you have that. But back in the day, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, and that's what I thought it was. I thought it was a straight, because I'm a huge fighting game fan, and I thought that's what it was. I'm like, man, it's almost there. But yeah, Pokken Tournament finally gave me what I've been looking for as far as Pokemon actually fighting each other and not, RPG style. It's actually, you actually fight.
Maybe this isn't. Maybe it's just not like a marketable enough story for like these anti-SJWs to talk about, and I'm sure it's out there, but I never hear people draw the comparisons between Pokemon and dog fighting. You know what I mean?
You mean now?
Well, at any time. I've thought
I remember that.
I'm sure people have talked about it, but it's basically, in a way you could argue that it's fictionalized dog fighting or any.
No, I remember when it was out. Parents were complaining about it being this is similar to cockfighting.
Right. Okay, so yes. I'm not the only one that thought of that, of course.
Yeah, it happened back when they first came out. I remember parents upset over that.
Like, I could be one of these people. I could be one of these busybodies. I can think up all of the arguments, and I'm sure you can too. I'm sure a lot of people can. It's just that most of us realize, this is silly and ridiculous, and I have other things to do with my time.
Yeah,
and
so
I don't really
real
think it's a problem.
cause there.
I mean, these are the same people in the 90s that were responsible for the ESRB being created.
Yep, which would allow them to put more shit into the game
Mm-hmm.
than they wanted. Like, it kind of defeated the purpose of them putting a rating system on. Now they just put more shit in it.
Well, it's just like Tipper Gore and the PMRC in the 80s with all these, controversial musicians. You put the label on there, that's going to make kids want it more.
More, yeah. Oh, that's what made Mortal Kombat, even on both platforms, or more so the Genesis, so huge too, because they made a big deal out of it, and it did what they didn't want. It sold more than they were hoping. It made more people want the game. It's human nature.
Well, remember when Sony Entertainment decided that they weren't going to air the interview at most of the movie theaters?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And then everybody started criticizing them, so they backpedaled and released it in most theaters anyway?
Yeah. People are really not in love with censorship, man, in any form. And
well, they were threatened by some anonymous organization.
Oh, yeah,
the Guardians of
right.
Peace. Yeah.
I'm just saying, though, in general, there's actually a science I saw in the quartering that scientifically shows get woke, go broke. And he had a whole, I forgot what websites you can go to, but you can see most people are just pretty normal. They're there's extremists on either side is usually,
they're not,
they see like about 8% of those are people that's like that. And they mostly live on Twitter. The average person don't think like that.
I call them wing cucks.
Okay.
Let's see here. Of course, the finish him move in Mortal Kombat.
Other than the Nintendo, you only had Nintendo systems. You never had.
No. I had NES, SNES, the Sega Genesis, the 64, the PlayStation 2, Xbox 360, GameCube, Wii, Game Boy, Game Gear, Neo Geo, or not Neo Geo, I wish, Gamecom, and of course now I have the Switch. So I'm familiar with all the other consoles. It's just that I don't see enough IP in Microsoft or Sony that make me want to buy one of their consoles.
Oh, okay.
But I keep up with all the other consoles. It's just these days it seems like most of the major stores are coming from Nintendo. But let's see here. Trying to make sure that all of your AV cables and power AC adapters were plugged in, or having to switch them out.
If you had multiple systems or just...
multiple systems.
Yeah, I had that issue. I would try to put... Well, this was before the HDMI cable where you could do anything, but everything I had to switch out or put it go through the VCR. One of my favorite... Well, not favorite. One of my craziest moments was I was playing Contra 3. I had these... huge speakers that my dad had with the wood panel. I think the wood panel speakers.
And I love wood panel. I know that's 70s, but it's so cool.
He had those, and they were. I hooked it up to my Super Nintendo through the VCR. I had the VCR running through the TV, so I could record, because me and my friend would record our Street Fighter fights.
Oh, nice.
On there, keep it on my tape, and then I played Contra 3. We played Contra 3 all the time. So,
hey, while you're on Street Fighter, did you have a favorite character?
Ken.
Ken?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mostly stuck with Ken also.
I mean, Ken and Raul were the same people, but Ken had, I don't know, he had the flame uppercut. Something about that.
Ken or Guile? I
liked him because I thought he had the hot top fade from.
Oh yeah. Then the four bosses I always felt they were overpowered, weren't they? It's been a while since I've played Street Fighter 2. But like Bison and Balrog.
God, what was I just talking about?
Contra.
If you get a chance, listen to Contra 3 soundtrack. I don't know what it was about that particular soundtrack, but it seemed louder than any other. Something about the music, the sound chip in that one was louder than, or it was loud. Even when you turned it up, you had to. Anyway, I ended up blowing out my speakers playing that game. They blew up those old speakers my dad had for years. Contra blew them out. Like, damn.
Y'all have to check that out.
But
one of the biggest things I've noticed over the years that's changed is the image of a gamer. Like back in the 80s and the 90s, they were more of the outcast, and now it's socially acceptable to everybody. Like, I think gamers had a clique back in the 90s, but nowadays it's just like you still have your fringe hardcore gamers, but gaming's become much more mainstream. And I think once PlayStation and Xbox entered, that really started to change things. So in the middle of the 2000s.
Yeah, that's when I saw. That's why it was foreign to me. I would see people argue over game systems, like to the point where it got. I don't like to use toxic. That's such an overused word now, but it had gotten so bad where people are arguing online with people they don't know over a game system somebody else bought.
Well, it's just like politics.
But it was weird. It's like, how did that happen? It was weird to me because, again, when I played games, it was even friends of ours. We did a lot of shit talking because we're competing against each other. That was it. It wasn't out of competition. It wasn't done out of your mom sucks because you bought a Genesis. We never did that. We never got personal with anybody over what game system somebody bought. It was a hobby. It's just something we did. It was nothing we took seriously in terms of, we wanted to win. We compete against each other. We never had these personal name calling people.
Well, there was a bit.
It is now.
Do you remember the bit that Dane Cook did about that?
Oh, I think so.
He was talking about people that joke or that say that rape's not funny. I forget the setup of the joke. And he's like, or saying the word's not funny. And he was talking about, have you ever been in an online chat room on a video game? I mean, these girls or these people that are saying rape's not funny, they're not going to be like, have you ever played Call of Duty online? Oh, dude, this guy just raped me so hard. Anyway, I forget the setup. It's whatever. But, yeah, what is said in online chat rooms, that was something that Bully Hunters, wasn't that what it was called? Bully Hunters? Not too long ago, they were trying to, like, find these online bullies in these online games and try to call them out. They were like an online bully watchdog group.
Only it was all fake.
It was a total disaster. Right, and it was all staged. And they were trying to find examples in like the hardest places to find them.
And see, this is what kills me about these third wave feminism is they keep talking about equality. They don't say men and women get harassed. They both get harassed, but it's just different types. Men, I've heard probably more so now because more men play games, but on average, but they've had talking about death threats. The one guy actually got killed because he got swatted. And because of the swatting, if people don't know what swatting is when someone calls the police. It usually happens to streamers. I've seen it happen more so to streamers. They send the cops to your house, so because it's almost like a prank call to the cops to have somebody comes not kick in your door because somebody reported something about you. And
yeah, because that's fucking hilarious. Just having the government come in and kick down your door because of some.
But bully hunters don't seem to. They don't ever seem to bring that up. That a man actually got killed over this. It's not just women getting harassed; it's everybody does.
Well,
anybody that plays games.
Anytime you have an identity politics movement or any kind of movement, you're always going to have some nut jobs under that banner that are going to make you look bad.
So it's like
and
everybody.
Your opponents are going to use that against you.
Yeah, it's like everybody gets harassed. I've been called names for beating people in games before. There's mute buttons, there's report buttons, there's things you can do to prevent a lot of the harassment. Or just don't get online. I don't know. One of the solutions you can just not need to play games. I don't know, but.
Well, yeah, that's always been what that's what I've always said too. If you don't like it, then change the channel. Then don't watch it.
But yeah, the nerd culture, if you will, has become. They gotten a little power, I guess. It's like the outcasts. You got certain groups in the outcasts are now trying to outcast other outcasts. This is weird. Again, this is stuff I've never seen, and I see it now. But growing up, this is foreign to me. Even it's like my brain can't process how someone could take the things that they take as seriously as they do to the point of, threatening a person or
you're a garbage human.
Any of that thing. I just like, it's a video game. You realize this is a video game. I don't know.
Well, people are going to find places to make careers out of it. I mean, on the far left, you have somebody like Anita Sarkeesian that takes advantage of video game culture, and then on the far right, you have somebody like Joel Osteen that just uses religion to build up his bank account. So, yeah, it's another wave of outrage, and people have found a way to make a career out of pointing these things out. And then, of course, you have somebody like Anita who, and I know that she's been beaten into the ground by this point, and then beaten again, who's not even a gamer, and then lies about it.
Yeah, I don't get that whole.
She saw an opportunity.
But yeah, I don't. The most I can remember, if there was like a Sega camp and a Nintendo camp, it was again, it wasn't even that serious. The most was like, aha, you have a Sega. And
I didn't really get involved in like the partisanship of it, I guess you could call it. I just sat back and I saw the smear ads that they would use against the companies would use against each other. Well,
like me and my best friend, we were hardcore Nintendo fans, so we used to giggle and laugh at Sega, like, aha, until I end up getting one. It's like, hey, man, I kind of like Sega, too. But, again, nothing. We said something, we didn't think about it the next second. It was nothing that important. It was not a big deal. We just kind of made fun of stuff, laughed at stuff. We didn't take it to the point of being an advocate for anything.
Right. I always liked Nintendo but I was always neutral. When I saw the Genesis, it was Sonic the Hedgehog, and I thought it was the coolest thing I ever saw.
Aladdin made me get a Genesis.
I hear that a lot. Aladdin was a very big game that was like, it made a divide. That was one of the instances where the Genesis version was better.
Yeah, they took whoever, I think it was Shiny Entertainment that did that game. David Perry was the founder. He did MDK, Earthworm Jim. Well, I think they published Earthworm Jim.
Earthworm Jim is a fucking classic.
Yeah, the guy I don't know if you know who Comicsgate is, but they do. He's one of the Comicsgaters. He's one of the guys that was the guy that actually did create Earthworm Jim.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, but yeah, that game. So yeah, Doug Tenable did Earthworm Jim, or created Earthworm Jim, and gave it to. But he did it. Came for Interplay.
Yeah, I think it was Interplay.
Shiny, yeah. But anyway, they did Aladdin, and the animation from that game was just like, wow, they did that on the Genesis. It looked just like a cartoon, like the animation was Disney-like. It wasn't the Super Nintendo version, where it was like, most other platformers. This one was like, looked like an actual cartoon, animated way. And when I saw that, I was like, that what made me get a Genesis was that particular game. And then I started looking at other Sega games, and I already know about Sonic and everything, but I was always a Mario. I was like Mario a little better because I didn't have to worry about speeding through the levels. Because I always thought that was a point.
Well, the thing about Sonic is, as the levels went on, speeding actually wasn't a good idea.
Good idea, right? Yeah.
You could kind of argue that like Sonic, the level progression was kind of a lesson in life. When you start out, you're taking things fast, but then you want to slow down. You want to look around a little more as you get, older, as you move on.
It's like later levels take the party animal out of you.
Yeah, Sonic, Major Killjoy.
Oh man, what else? I remember the Super Scope.
Oh yeah, the
for Super
Yoshi
Nintendo.
Safari. Yeah, because Nintendo wanted to be friendly. They said, well, let's not make a gun, let's make a fucking bazooka.
Yeah. The friend of mine, he had Terminator 2 and some robot game. I can't remember what the robot game was called.
What was the gun that Sega put out? It looked just like a revolver.
Oh, man.
You know what I'm talking about, though.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I can't remember the name of it.
I remember just by chance, I got a game lot. This guy was selling a box of games for like $20 on Craigslist, and he had a copy of Snatcher for the Sega CD. And that used that same gun, I believe. It had a name, a nickname that you would give to a gun. Let's see. Not the light gun. The Minister? No. That was... But that
was Minister.
Well, that's not the one I'm thinking of.
Oh. Virtual gun?
The Justifier.
Oh.
The Justifier. It was a blue revolver. Everything was blue except for the trigger was black.
God, I remember. Talking about remembering things. The Minister almost looks like a sawed-off version of the Super Scope. Almost.
Just reminds me of a Nerf gun. Or something out of a sci-fi movie.
Not Time Cop. Not Time Cop. Not Time Cop.
House of the Dead?
No. Well, that, but it was a cop game where it was on rails. On Sega, I guess?
Time Crisis.
Time Crisis, yeah.
Yes.
But they had remember a game called Sniper. I remember playing that at
I remember
Dave and
I've
Buster's.
seen that game, but I haven't played it.
I remember playing that at Game and Dave and Buster's.
Oh yeah, they're still around too, right? Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know.
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
think they are.
You can see them off 70 on Earth City. So, they still got games. By the way, while we're on arcades, did you ever go to the Tilt in Northwest Plaza?
Only arcade I frequent was Aladdin's Castle.
Oh, well, by the time I was going to arcades, they only did tokens. And I remember at most of the tilts, you would put in $1 and you get 4 tokens. At this one, you'd only get 3.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, that was weird. Like I said, the dollar, when you put in, you got quarters before, that was equivalent to giving you change for the dollar. Then they changed the token.
A token was 25 cents.
That's weird. I don't know they did 3.
Well, one arcade I went to recently, a lot of the arcades, the newer arcades I've been to, I've noticed they use, just like Dave & Buster's, they use cards instead of tokens or quarters. So you'll pay for so much to a card and then just use that for credits. Okay. It's a credit system, basically. Did you ever have the Sega Channel?
No.
Do you know what that was?
The only thing I remember, I don't know if the Dreamcast count. They don't know the Dreamcast had anything like that. I know if you went to the website, I don't know if it had something similar to Sega Channel, or was it a separate?
It was basically a streaming service where you could play demos of upcoming or current Sega games, and the catalog would change monthly. And I remember talking to my parents or yelling my parents into it.
I just saw the logo. Yeah. I remember
we had it for a few months, I remember.
It launched in '94.
Yeah, you went to your local cable company. I think it was Charter, or I'm not even sure what it was at the time.
TCI. I remember Time Warner Cable. We used to have. That's who we used to pay our cable bill to. Was them before Charter took over, like late '99 or early 2000s.
We've never had Comcast, have we?
No, I don't think so. The earliest dish service, as my dad had, it was Prime something. God, what was that called? Because I remember getting the PlayStation, the first PlayStation that year. It was like '95.
Hey, did you run out of room on your PlayStation memory card?
Oh yeah, I've had several. How many did I have altogether? I have to count how many I had. I had at least 6.
I was still going off my parents' money at that point, so I only had 1.
Oh,
and I'd have to go around and decide which files to delete.
Yeah, but I mean, I was in college working around that time, so I was able to. That's crazy. My very first game I actually bought was A Link to the Past. I was working at the school, at my college. Working at my college, my dad bought me the Super Nintendo, and that's when Super Mario World came with it. But I still had a whole crap load of NES games.
I wish I had been older during this era, because there was a lot of things that just went over my head. I'd get out of elementary school and come home and play the Super Nintendo. The first console I ever had was an NES, and I'd watch my mom play it as I grew up. But by the time I started playing, I think, the Super Nintendo was in full effect at that time. It was like 93, 94.
Well, I was still late to the party myself, in a sense. I mean, 85 when the NES came out, and then I didn't get one till 90. But the good thing is that it had such a shit ton of games at the time, so I had a lot to pick from.
Oh, yeah. I just remember this also. Do you know what the last game released on the Super Nintendo was?
I always said Chrono Trigger. Of course, that's not it. I really don't remember.
Frogger.
I mean, one of the last games.
Frogger.
What?
97, I believe, and then they also released it on the PlayStation. It was a better version. The Frogger on the SNES was just a 16-bit version of the original Frogger, I believe.
Oh, okay.
But the PlayStation version had much larger, expanded levels. They were trying to jump on that whole 3D platformer bandwagon, but it didn't work out quite as well. It was a hard as hell game, the PlayStation version.
I wish I kept my Croc version, my Croc game from PlayStation. When you said that, for some reason, it made me think about Croc.
You know, amphibians, reptiles, pretty close.
In love with, well, I went by the color green. I didn't think about whether it was a reptile versus amphibian. I just thought color green made me think of Croc. But anyway, I played the shit out of that. Beat that. Then Spyro came out, was better than that one, so I think I ended up trading Croc in.
Crash Bandicoot. I remember seeing that in every store when it came out, right? When did the PlayStation come out? That was before or after 64?
I'm going to say 90. It's around the same time.
Yeah.
I'm going to say 94 in Japan. I think we got it in 95. The Sega Saturn. So that was around 95, because I remember getting my PlayStation around 95. So I wanted to say N64 came out at least a year later.
I remember.
Or close to a year later. Somewhere in there.
I mean, for a minute.
After that.
Well, for a minute, it seemed like that was going to be the big competition. Was going to be Sony, Sega, and Nintendo.
I didn't think Sony had a chance, actually, because they were new. I thought it was going to be Sega and Nintendo again. But Sony kicked the shit out of both of them over time, you know. Especially when Final Fantasy VII came out and Metal Gear, it really... but a lot of people that are around your age or a little younger, a lot of them had Nintendo 64s more so. Because they can name a ton of games from that system.
My big problem with the 64 is that they were just so weak on RPGs.
Yeah, that's why, Sony ended up taking... That's why I said I think by the time Final Fantasy came out, that's when I think Sony really kicked in gear.
That's what made PlayStation such a force, was that all the third parties jumped over there.
Yeah. And Saturn was the inferior version of... I mean, if you look at the Resident Evils on the PlayStation and the Saturn, I saw a guy that's...
no idea.
Speed runs. Oh, well. There's a guy, he speed runs. I watch, he speed runs Resident Evil games. He ended up getting a Saturn because his mother or his grandmother was supposed to get him a PlayStation. And she ended up getting the wrong system, and he ended up getting a Saturn. So he speed runs the American and Japanese version of Resident Evil 7. And he was showing the difference, graphical difference, there's even animation. There's some things that was look different. But
I've got another list of nostalgic things. Let's see here. This one is from Total Nerd. Or I'm sorry, no, this is Ranker.com. Never mind. 13 things every 90s gamer will instantly relate to. Okay, blowing on cartridges. We already knew that. Instruction booklets. And again, the instruction booklets were so fucking cool. Oh, yeah. Multiplayer included multiple people in the same room.
No, that's before LAN. But yeah, I think, and maybe because I'm old, but I don't think anything beats playing with somebody in the same room. Especially if you got a company or like there's a crowd of you there, and you always took turns. I remember going to when Soul Calibur came out on Dreamcast. When I used to go to Game Trader, there was a guy I met there. He was a hardcore Soul Calibur guy too. So he invited me to come hang out with him because I was gonna learn some stuff from the game from him because he's fucking a god. He was so good at the game, and I was still learning it. I go there, man. It was just a crowd of him and just all of them, like it's a house full of people just playing games on Dreamcast. That was cool. It was like nothing better than that. I like the convenience of playing online, but it just won't beat.
I remember the first LAN party I went to was for Halo back in like 2005. And they probably had like 6 consoles set up in the basement and 20 TV screens. And I believe that was the first time I ever played Halo, actually. I get why people like it. I get why people like it. That's all I'll say.
Split screen. I remember split screens.
Some of those sucked.
Well, that's all that's all we had. It's crazy because you can still see the person. I guess back then we didn't think of it because there's no other way to really do it. Racing games are still, I think Mario Kart still does
concealing where you are from your opponent. Yeah,
there was no way to really do that. So those why LAN parties were really cool because you don't have to, but that's all they had. If you want to play against somebody, you had to do the split screen deal. I think racing games, still does split screen. I know. I'm assuming Mario Party still split screen and racing games like Mario Kart. I don't think I think anything outside of Nintendo, I think, don't do split screen, but I think Nintendo
right
still does it, if I'm not mistaken, with Mario Kart and maybe Mario Party.
How about not knowing what DLC was?
No, how about when DLC was free before,
Right, that's what I'm saying, the pre-DLC era.
Everything I remember was before that. I remember games, if you beat it, unlocked other stuff. That's what I missed too. That was in the past. Unlockables to games just for beating it or
being a completionist.
Yeah. There was, I guess, some form of DLC. Without it, you have the micro transaction or DLC. I remember DLC did not exist.
Did you ever fight with somebody over who has to play the second player? Like if it's a sidekick role?
Like Double Dragon, for example, they were basically the same character, just different colors, suits. I think two-player games at the time didn't really have a difference in the characters. So I guess you didn't feel like you were at a disadvantage or advantage with a character because they were basically the same. I think we were pretty much cool with it. I think the rule was if whoever house you were over, for example, that's who had first dibs on the first character. You're just going to be the second player. Now, if it was like four of us, we kind of had, I think we used to go by age when we flipped the coin. I can't remember how we actually did it, but no, we never got into arguments or fights or anything like that over a two-player game or anything, or co-op game.
I was an only child, and a lot of my friends didn't really play games, so I never really had that problem very often. But it just seems to be something that would have been an issue back in those times.
Now, fighting games was different because we still didn't do it. It used to be a thing where if you were used to fighting from the left side or the right side, and people say, "Hey, man, can I play on that side?" Because
that's a good point.
Some people play better facing left or facing right. So if you're playing a fighting game and you always play by yourself and you played against somebody, you were so used to facing that way. And
well, especially if you played the one-player mode a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, doing a Hadouken from left to right's a lot easier than right to left.
Yeah. But I used to know, I think 3D games like Soul Calibur actually helped me to be able to play both sides because it's a 3D game. So you have to switch side stuff and stuff like the Tekken. Same thing. But 2D playing, you're always facing right. Yeah. Everything scrolled like you're reading a paragraph or something, from right to left. No, right? Yeah, left to right.
Left to right, unless you're talking about manga.
Yeah. Manga, right. But every game scrolled facing right. Or anything you did was always going that way. It never did a back and forth or anything like that. Usually it didn't. But
do you think
games was usually...
Do you think that has to do with most people being right-handed?
I don't know. I thought it was just. I thought because that's how people read stuff.
Yeah.
That's why they did it
well,
that way.
why is that? Why is that from left to right? I think if more people were left-handed, it would be from right to left.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know for sure. I'm sure that there are historians that know a lot more about this, but that always has been something I've wondered about too. Why has it always been left to right? Okay, so I've got 2 words. Blast processing.
Mode 7.
Mode 7, the fake 3D background effect for the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
The funny thing about
seeing
the funny thing about that is that they had the SNES had layers numbered from 0 to 8, I believe, and Mode 7 was the one that stuck because that was the most visually impressive one of the time.
Well, I used to laugh that Sega's comeback was the blast processing. Our games were faster.
Right, so what exactly was blast processing?
I think what it was, if I remember correctly, and I could be wrong, but I remember Super Nintendo games had a habit of lagging. It wasn't really called lag. What was it called at the time?
Glitching, freezing up, slow down.
No, it was called slow down.
Slow down.
Slow
yeah.
down.
Okay.
And I don't think most of Sega's games, I don't think they had a lot of slowdown in their games. Because I think when the enemies would fill up the screen on some Super Nintendo games, you would get that slowdown. I don't think, and I could be wrong, but I think that's why the blast processing was.
Well, I remember there being slowdown in Genesis games though too. In Sonic, the original Sonic actually had that issue.
Oh, did it? Oh, okay.
I don't think it was as bad as Super Nintendo.
I don't know. I remember blast processing at the 17th level of Geometry Dash at 4th level. I don't know. What's that? What is a freaking game called blast processing? What is Sega's definition of blast processing? I really don't know. I remember they used to make a big deal about that.
I think you pretty much touched on it. They were bragging that they had superior processing power.
Blast processor was a marketing term coined by Sega of America to advertise the faster processing performance of the Sega Mega Drive, Sega Genesis in that region, compared to competing platforms at the time, specifically the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was the poster board for the campaign, being faster than any other platform game at the time. The ad campaign featured commercial races between 2 vehicles, and the Super Nintendo strapped to one and the SNES strapped to another.
But what does that say about Sega? What does that say about Sega's perception of their own console? I think they knew that they didn't have the more popular characters.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It seemed like that's all they could pull out of their ass was that. Nintendo had the sound chip, the graphics.
They have the sound chip, the graphics, the character licenses.
So,
but our games are faster.
I think that's all they could.
And that worked in the 90s because that kind of reputation was good. It was a popular thing to have.
I definitely. Oh, talking about remembering thing. I missed the Sega yell.
The Sega yell?
Sega. They would do that.
Oh, right, Sega.
And then they stopped for a while, and then they brought it back somewhat with the Dreamcast, I think. Because I think they had stopped doing that with the Saturn, and then I think somewhere with the Dreamcast they were trying to bring it back because a lot of people, that was an advertisement thing. I remember Play It Loud campaign Nintendo had.
What about Segata Senshiro?
You have to refresh my memory on that one.
Look him up.
I have to be able to spell that. Segata,
so Sega and TA. And then San Shiro.
How you spell Chiro? Just how it sounds?
Shiro. Shiro.
Shiro, okay. Oh, it's one sense. Oh, okay. It's a fictional character created by Sega.
You remember this guy?
No.
Yeah, he was a martial artist that defended Sega to the death. He actually deflected an asteroid or a missile that was going to, in one of the commercials, a missile was fired into Sega's headquarters building, and he ran up the side of the building and he punched the missile. He grabbed the missile and he turned it into orbit.
No.
You gotta when you get the time, watch some of his commercials, man. It's over the top, crazy, high action stuff, man.
Which makes me I have this weird thing. I think I told you I have this thing with word association that made me think of the Brisk commercials.
The tea?
Yeah, where they would have whoever these they look like claymation, but I don't think it was quite clay of celebrities.
Oh yeah. They had Danny DeVito on one of them. I remember. That's Brisk, baby.
Yeah, something about this commercial reminds me of that. Well, the over the topness of it. I've never seen these commercials before.
He would just show up and just beat the crap out of everybody, and he was trying to promote the Sega Saturn. And he had a life-size Sega Saturn controller that he would practice on, and he would just he'd lay it on the ground and just start punching the buttons like he was doing a routine exercise.
Never knew this. I don't know how I missed this. I remember when PlayStation had trying to find a mascot. They used the face.
Yeah, I remember the face.
And the girl from Toshinden, Battle Arena Toshinden, Sophia. And then Crash was supposed to be the official one, but
wasn't he for a while?
For a while.
Maybe not official, but yeah, he was like their strongest franchise.
I think Spyro, then it kind of like it's Universal's
Spyro was a good one. What about Medieval?
I played the first Medieval.
Yeah, I think everybody played the first Medieval. And then it just kind of tapered off after that.
I remember Time Splitters was a big deal, and Siphon Filter was another big deal. Or at least around the people that I knew played the hell out of those games.
So this wasn't in America, but in Japan, the Super Nintendo actually had their own version of the Sega Channel.
Oh, okay.
It was called the Satellaview, I believe it was called. And that was the first time that you could download Super Nintendo updates, remakes of old Nintendo games. They had the original Zelda. That was where you first saw the remake of Super Mario Brothers that eventually became Super Mario All-Stars. And then there was a completely new game that they never released that was based off of A Link to the Past. It used all the graphics and characters, but it was a completely original quest. And I can't remember the name of the game. It was sort of to A Link to the Past what Majora's Mask was to Ocarina of Time.
Oh, okay.
But that, they teamed up with a local Japanese satellite broadcasting company, and the service lasted for a handful of years. I can't remember how long. I mean, nobody in America knew about it until the internet became a thing, but eventually people could download the games and play them. They actually had real voice actors doing some of the dialogue for some of the games. It was a pretty ambitious project, but now it's a relic, basically.
I did not know that TurboGrafx 16, I guess the PC engine was the same console, or just different. I guess had a different name in another region. Oh, I didn't know that.
The TurboGrafx 16.
Yeah, I thought that and the PC Engine were separate systems. I think it was called PC Engine in another region, and TurboGrafx 16 in Europe and America, I guess. I thought it was completely separate systems. I didn't know anybody had a Neo Geo. I saw the cartridges. I've seen the cartridges. I'm like, huge.
It's an arcade machine minus the cabinet. No, I mean, that literally is what it is. I knew somebody that had a cabinet. Yeah.
I saw an actual, again, when I used to go to Game Trader, because I had never seen the cartridge before. But I knew it was, I knew it was, but anyway, I think it was huge. Cartridges were huge. I remember when the I think the 3DO and the Jaguar. 3DO was, I forgot what it was priced when it first came out. And I couldn't stand full motion video games because it seemed like that's all 3DO was putting out at the time. Plus the system, hella expensive.
Yeah, it was somewhere near $700.
God. Panasonic. And it was weird. They came out with 3 buttons for the control. And then Atari had...
What?
No, the Jaguar. I'm saying the Atari Jaguar had like the calculator button pad thing. A dude I know, it's the only one I knew that had one, but he was explaining to me what it did. I was like, I didn't know that. That's what those buttons were for. I forgot what he told me, but they actually functioned as something. He said the best game on there was Alien vs. Predator. I think it was Alien vs. Predator. Most people did praise that game, but it seemed like it was the only good game on the Atari Jaguar. It was just like, there was only room for like at least 3 companies. It's the ones we got kind of now. Before then it was maybe Sega, Nintendo, and Sony, but...
Well, it doesn't even really seem like there's room for 3 major companies at this point because Nintendo is really a far third place.
But it's still 3, though.
Yeah, there's still 3, but it doesn't seem like there can be 3 on an equal platform.
Oh, no, it's always got to go Alpha. Right now I think Sony is that Alpha. Unless PC, count PC, but I don't know if most people do or not. But PC Master Race, and then it's the other consoles.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but it almost seems like that's a different market. I mean, yeah, a lot of people, I mean, you know, you and I, well, do you play PC? You play PC, right?
I play some Steam games, yeah.
Yeah, same here. Like, I'm a little PC, but I feel like the Steam PC is not even the same as the regular PC. But I've always just seen them as a separate market, pretty much. That might not be accurate, but what I'm getting at is when it comes to consoles, it seems like at any time there's really only 2 at the top, and Nintendo tends to take a third place. Now, if you look back in the past, when it was Nintendo and Sega at the top, there was usually a third party, but they never lasted as long.
Well, I base it based on relevancy. I mean, even if they're in a distant third, or whoever's in a distant third, they're still here.
Right, they're still up there.
So I still have to include them as the major 3. But yeah, you're not going to have them all equal at all. It's not, even when it was just Sega and Genesis, I mean, they were sort of neck and neck. I mean, for everybody I knew that had a Nintendo, Super Nintendo, or Nintendo, I knew somebody with a Genesis too. Now, it's either... Well, then I hear people, they either go PlayStation, Switch, and PC, or Xbox, PC. And I don't know, but 2 people with a Switch.
I just think that... When do you think Nintendo's next console will come out? Assuming there's going to be a next console. Like 2023?
I don't know.
I mean, it's hard to say, but I just think if Nintendo stuck to making a more traditional console, not too experimental, they still have strong franchises they can use, and they're still friendly to third-party developers, I think they could really compete again.
I think they should just make games all.
But they kind of stuck themselves into a corner because they're so kid-friendly, and they kind of have to rely on gimmicks.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If they do like Sega, get out of the console market, and this is just me. I don't know what they can do. I wonder if they peaked. I had a conversation with my friend about that. I think Nintendo has peaked. I feel like Breath of the Wild. Like, what more can they do better than Breath of the Wild? What can they do better than Switch? Unless make another version of the Switch.
Well, I mean, to be fair, though, weren't we asking the same question when Ocarina of Time came out?
I didn't. I always thought, given that new systems come out maybe every 5 to 10 years, technology can always improve. But when you're in a position Nintendo's in, where you either have to make a system as powerful as the other 2, or they got to go off on their own. If they ever get on topic, I don't know how console-wise they can be beat I mean, they did it with the Wii, 101 million on those systems, but then they dipped with the Wii U, and then the Switch is, I got to give it a 2 to 3 year lifespan to see how much more they can sell with its lifetime. But what can they do? I'm trying to think what they can do better than the Switch, where you got people accustomed to, this hybrid thing.
Well, I think there are things that they could leave behind. Instead of adding on, I think there are things that they can drop, like having their family-friendly reputation. I mean, that would be a risk for them. But if they could try to compete on the same level as Xbox and PlayStation...
But they have tried to be...
But I mean...
They just got that stigma on them, though. It's just not leaving.
Not since the 90s.
I mean, when they stopped being... at least allowing other type of games to be on there that wasn't kid-friendly. You got MK2 and Conker's Bad Fur Day. They did get to a point.
But, I mean, even that's been like 2 decades.
That, but I'm saying, even though they did try to get away from that, they just got the stigma on them. They're not going to get rid of that. Regardless, it's like they have tried to not be as kid-friendly, but they can't get the stink off of them. They're always going to be known as that. And I think...
Are they, though?
They can still...
Don't you think that they could make an effort?
I think they have made an effort. Unless you're talking about Nintendo making their own games. But that's what you mean. Before, they wouldn't even allow Blood or anything from a third-party publisher to be on their platform. Then once MK2 came out, they did do that. But regardless that they did that, it doesn't... They still have the stench of kid-friendly on them. They can't get rid of it. The people still think that they're... I don't know what they can do to get rid of it. They have tried, in terms of allowing... Hell, I just bought a game on there called...
I just think it'll take some time.
I may be missing your point there. Their time to do what exactly?
Well, I'm saying, yeah, okay, I agree. They've made some efforts to move away from being the kid-friendly company, but I think that changing their reputation is something that's going to take time.
I don't even know if they're trying to change their reputation.
Well, they've taken on more violent third-party games with the Switch.
Right, but I think they're just going to be stigmatized regardless.
But how do we know that that's going to last
probably
forever?
be dead. I have no idea. I can't predict.
Right, you don't have any idea. I don't have any idea. It's hard to say. Now, I think that Nintendo is content with being the third place different company when it comes to the race. And I like what they're doing for the most part. I mean, if you look at them from a 3-player competition perspective, yeah, you can easily criticize their decisions, but just from their own perspective, just from looking at Nintendo for what it is, for what they do, for what they put out, I still think they're a great company, but maybe they're trying to compete by being different, but I don't know. I have that. I guess that's that inner Nintendo fanboy coming out, trying to say, Nintendo, you can do this, you can do this, you can be great, make Nintendo great again, basically. But
well, I guess I missed your question to me then. What you're asking me? Well, first you asked me when I think their next console may be coming out.
Well, yeah. That was basically just speculation over a date. But the point was, what they could do with their next console that could change their position in the gaming market.
And then I think I said, I think, in my opinion, they've peaked unless they make... I think from here, all they can do is make a different version of the Switch or a more powerful version of the Switch. If they made a just a standalone console where you don't get to take it anywhere with you, I think people may feel like it's a step backwards. I don't know.
No, that's a good point.
Whereas the other systems, they've known to be just home consoles. They can always upgrade to more powerful But I think if Nintendo wants to be in first place, or if they care to be, or if they're comfortable with their position, there could be the case. But
I think that, honestly, I think they think that they'll never be back in first place. They got too greedy when they were. And if they ever have a chance of getting there again, it's going to be a long time.
And I would probably, like, in my perfect world, I would, I guess, be a publisher, like what kind of Sega did, not license out, but make maybe games for the other systems. But it's not been a console that they made that I didn't get other than a Virtual Boy. I enjoyed their system. I mean, I enjoyed the hell out of the Wii U. I thought the Wii U was fantastic. I think that Nintendo's weird about marketing. They always leave something out.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not something graphical, it's an online thing. If it's not that, it's, I don't know.
They leave the back door open. They know where the strong points are, and then they just say, "Oh yeah, we'll support this down the road," and then they just decide not to.
And I think the moment that they actually did try to be with the crowd, so to speak, is with the 3DS, because the 3D TVs, the 3D craze was kind of a big deal. So they made this 3DS, and most people didn't use the 3D. I don't know. Nintendo is.
I remember the first time I saw that, it just gave me a headache.
It didn't bother me, but over time I was like, I don't really need this on.
Yeah, it was just sort of a gimmick.
Yeah, I like the option, but I just didn't use it.
I mean, going all the way back to Rob the Robot, Nintendo's been full of gimmicks. That's how they got their game into the U.S. market in the first place.
You know what's the crazy thing about all this is Nintendo is the reason why we even have a gaming market, period.
Well, it's impossible to say how history would have played out if we hadn't had Nintendo.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the reality we live in, yeah, absolutely, Nintendo was the one that started it.
Or restarted it after the crash. They were the ones to bring back.
Well, yeah, but I mean, up until that point, video games were just seen as a fad.
Yeah.
I mean, even through Nintendo's, the NES days, it was still seen as a fad. And I think that's what the big cultural shift was when society, the media decided or realized, oh, this isn't a fad, this is now a main thing. That's why you see now, or at least I think that some of these guys on YouTube that have channels completely dedicated to video games, they were originally seen as a passing craze, but now video games are seen, they're held with the same respect as movies are, even though in the past they were even seen as a passing fad. So video games are, it's something that people used to argue over now, but video games are an art form. Or I think they are.
I'm trying to remember when. See, I can't remember a negative. The only thing negative I remember about video games growing up was it might mess up your TV. The parents didn't want to hook up. Well, it did if you leave the screen on pause. It would do something to some TVs, but.
Oh yeah, it would burn the image into the screen.
Burn the screen, but
you saw that in arcade machines.
Yeah, but in terms of, I can't remember it being like
people dismissing it as an irrelevant passing thing.
Yeah, I never experienced that because, like I said, my parents were freaking at the arcades. Because of them, I got into video games. Right. My parents were into it.
You and I are in an exceptional group of people. Like, we grew up, with people that also played the games, were a part of the culture.
And that's the thing, too. I don't think it was a culture. It was just a hobby, something to do for fun. Well, it was a distraction to just escape, like a movie was. Well, go to the arcade.
Well, I do think that it is a culture now. I mean, whether or not
now, of course, yeah, now, yeah. But back then, it was just seen as a hobby, a thing to do.
Right. Well, the same thing applies to movies.
Is there a movie culture? I guess there is. I don't know.
Oh, well, the film critics, the real film snobs, the film buffs.
I'm just saying when I grew up, it wasn't considered. There was no culture attached to it. It was
No,
just.
I mean it's just a title that's applied. Like it's a group of people that like and talk about video games. They celebrate video games, and that grew over time to the point finally where the mainstream said, "Oh, okay, well we now recognize this as a subculture." It's kind of like Star Trek fans in the 70s or the 60s. Now, fan conventions are a regular thing.
I don't know. It's what till later I heard people say, "Yeah, we were made fun of for playing."
Well, it doesn't.
I never experienced that.
It doesn't really matter. I mean, all movements, all fan bases start small and then they grow over time. And usually, when you're in a smaller group or something that's not mainstream, there are always going to be people that think it's silly, and whether or not that fandom actually grows or not will determine whether or not it becomes popular. It's sort of like communism. It was an idea that some people had, and then it grew over time, and then it became a movement.
Well, like I said, I didn't have experiences of, I didn't even know outside of there was a negative or positive thing to it. It was just a thing. It wasn't until later I would hear people tell stories of, yeah, people thought I was a nerd for playing. Like, I never experienced that. I didn't know it was a thing to be looked down upon. But I didn't experience that. We just went to the arcade and played games, and I don't remember being called a nerd for it. I never experienced having to defend myself for playing games. That was never a thing I had experience with my circle of friends or anything. We just did it. There was just never a big thing.
Well, I never really had that problem either. I just noticed that in the 90s, for example, video games were more viewed as something that you did on the side, or something that wasn't necessarily relevant. It was just a toy that you could buy. But now it's more of a regular thing that a lot more people do. And I think a lot of that has to do with how video games have been streamlined in the modern era to appeal to the most people, the largest group of people possible. And I also think part of it has to do with the fact that a lot of people that were kids back in the 80s and the 90s are still playing games today. They realize, oh, this isn't just some kind of trend. This is actually something that's, going to last for a long time, that has a relevancy that people are talking about. That's what it is. It has, it has relevancy in society. It's something that a lot of people can relate to and talk about now, as opposed to back in the 80s when video games were such a new thing. I mean, what could you say? Hey, remember the Intellivision?
Yeah. I would say it became, I think when the whole Congress thing happened is when they noticed this hobby, I guess, becoming, it was something I guess no one knew was a thing or was aware of. And I think that's when it hit mainstream hard, was the whole Congress thing and people getting, I want to say Mortal Kombat was probably one of the big reasons things kind of start getting mainstream, because it hit the news. I mean, I think when the new system came out, you probably find some old commercials or news clips of when.
I mean, as macabre as it might sound, you could also probably bring up Columbine, because video games were blamed for that also.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It seemed like, to me too, it was just a new thing to blame a new popular thing on. I mean, I remember growing up, Friday the 13th movies were being blamed for Judas Priest was blamed for rock and roll music. I remember, oh my God, I remember hearing radio shows. Even the Geraldo would do these talk shows on rock and roll music, and they're of the devil and how they harm people. And I used to get into arguments with people when that became an old thing to argue. It's like, well, video games is now the new enemy, or the new like Road Runner cartoons was blamed for shit, and Transformers was blamed for shit. The Ninja Turtle movie was blamed for shit. Harry Potter, you know, it's just on. And then video games became the new thing to put a Band-Aid on an actual situation that we probably need to talk about, instead of actually talking about, well, maybe this person had an issue that didn't get dealt with, instead of we go right to the popular medium at the time. And it's to blame that thing. But like I said, and I used to get to arguing like, it's just a new popular thing to blame, because before it was music. Now y'all don't blame music anymore. Now you blame just the one thing.
Yeah, that's...
It's like
my problem with people that bring up their social issues, they tend to blame everything but themselves.
Dude, I remember when Jason... I remember this... he did a whole story on Friday the 13th movies and how it made this kid... I can't remember what... I know he committed murder or something, but they blamed Jason movies for it. He watched so many horror movies in it, but nobody went to see, what was this kid neglected? Does his parent pay attention to him? Was there anything else going on? They just blamed Jason for everything. I remember that time that was going on. So, it's weird. I don't know.
People are always going to search for an easy excuse to their problems. I mean, that's what it really comes down to. And whether you blame... It's just so much shit. There really is... There really is no good answer, whether or not you're blaming it for sexism or violence or social injustice or bloodlust. It's just a shortcut to thinking, if you ask me.
Hell, I found myself, especially I was teaching, I think if it wasn't for video games, I would have snapped. Like, I had to get out my aggression on something, and I just played a game, and it came out of me. Now, some people don't work that way with some people.
No, I'm the same.
For me,
I'm the same way, actually. I get my rocks off by running people over and shooting them.
Because I used to play... I would come home and play Halo and imagine it was... This is so wrong to say. It was the students I had to deal with that day. Of course, I would never kill a kid, but I would play the game. I would play it like, that's the little bastard I had to deal with today. And I would pretend I shot him in the face, but it prevented me from doing that in real life. I didn't have to bring hard. It actually, working with kids actually taught me more patience, actually. Mm-hmm. It was just weird, because I had none before I actually taught. But yeah, I had some rough days with some of these students, and I had to, sometimes play a game, pretend it was the little bastard I had to deal with that day, and I got it out. I'm cool now. I don't advocate killing children. Just saying.
I'm glad you put that out there.
I had to get it out. Yeah, let me put that out there.
You're not approving the murder of children. For the record.
No. For the record.
For the record. And I think that's a good place to end it, man. I got to get going. I got to get up in the morning.
Yeah, I think that's a good time, too. My daughter is doing her kid thing. So...
Well, we did our nostalgia thing. I think we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, except the video game cartoons.
Oh shit! I had that on my list too.
And video game movies.
Yeah, let's do that on another episode where we do shows and movies based on games. Yeah, good idea.
Alrighty. I gotta go get something to drink and then see what this kid wants.
Cayman Jack, man.
All right.
All right, well, until next time then.
This is Phantom Outlaw signing out.
And Zuve, until the next time. All right.
Later.